Verbal reasoning. Verbal reasoning is understanding and reasoning using concepts framed in words. It aims at evaluating ability to think constructively, rather than its simple fluency or vocabulary recognition. Verbal reasoning tests. Verbal reasoning tests of intelligence provide an assessment of an individual's ability to think, reason and solve problems in different ways. For this reason, verbal reasoning tests are often used as entrance examinations by schools, colleges and universities to select the most able applicants. Additionally, such tests are also used by a growing number of employers as part of the selection recruitment process. WAIS 3. The Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale 3 WAIS 3 divides verbal IQ (VIQ) into two categories. Verbal Comprehension Index (VCI) vocabulary, similarities, information, and comprehension. Working Memory Index WMI arithmetic, digit span, and letter number sequencing. 1-2 LSAT. The Law School Admission Test LSAT is a classic measure that evaluates the verbal reasoning ability of participants who are applying to a graduate law school. The multiple choice sections are broken up into 3 parts. Reading comprehension, ability to understand complex language material like paragraphs or passages and able to answer questions regarding them. 3. Analytical reasoning, ability to understand relationships in language material like statements or passages and being able to draw reasonable conclusions from them. 3. Logical reasoning, using critical thinking to assess and complete an argument given on the test. 3. Verbal reasoning in recruitment. Large graduate training schemes are increasingly using verbal reasoning tests, verbals, to distinguish between applicants. The types of verbals candidates face in these assessments are typically looking to assess understanding and comprehension skills. Verbal reasoning tests are often used during recruitment for positions in many industries, such as banking, finance, management consulting, mining and accounting. The tests are used as an efficient way to shortlist candidates for later stages of the recruitment process, such as interview. When used in recruitment, the tests normally include a series of text passages regarding a random topic. Then there will be a series of statements regarding the passages. The candidate must then determine if a statement is true, false, or they cannot tell it is ambiguous. The candidate is not expected to know anything about the topics, and the answer is to be based purely on the information in the passage. 4. Concepts. This section of the article briefly elucidates the general elements relating to verbal reasoning in order of increasing complexity. Vocabulary and grammar. Vocabulary, the knowledge of words' meanings in a language, and grammar, knowledge of words' proper relation to one another in a language, can function both as prerequisites as well as topics of focus of verbal reasoning. In the former capacity, they are used to form propositions and arguments, see below, while in the latter capacity they are the subject of analysis and evaluation, where verbal reasoning synthesizes linguistic information and analyzes relationships among component parts of sentences, words, and concepts. 5-6. Propositions. Basic element of reasoning, verbal, or otherwise, is the proposition. A proposition is simply the meaning behind a declarative sentence that can be either true or false. Note, special care is taken here to mention that the proposition is specifically what is meant by such a sentence, and is not the actual sentence itself. In other words, a proposition is something that one can know, believe, think, assume, or so on. 7th worth explicitly mentioning here is that only some, and not necessarily all, statements count as propositions. This is because the defining feature of a proposition is that it is necessarily making some assertion which can intelligibly be assigned a truth value. In other words, statements are only propositions if they are truth apt. To illustrate this principal distinction, let us consider the following 2 statements. The sky is blue. Tell me your name. The first sentence is a proposition because it purports a fact which is either true or untrue. The second sentence, however, is not a proposition, because it does not appear to make any true, false assertion, that is, there is nothing meant by the sentence that one could say were or weren't true. Premises and conclusions. A premise is a proposition in an argument which will justify or induce a conclusion. That is, premises are propositions which, if true, allow for the logical inference of an associated proposition which is known as a conclusion. To give an example, the statement, John is a bachelor, is a premise in the one-sentence argument, John is a bachelor, therefore John is unmarried, and the conclusion is that John is unmarried. Premises may be treated somewhat differently according to the specific type of argument in which they occur. In a deductive argument, premises are often assumed to be true, regardless of whether or not they really are. This is juxtaposed against inductive arguments, in which there is merely a chance of some premises and/or conclusions being true. Arguments and reason. An argument is a series of premises together with one or more conclusions. Arguments can serve a variety of purposes, ranging from determining the degree of truth of a conclusion, to persuading individuals to accept or reject some beliefs, as in the case of rhetoric. An additional note on arguments is that they may take a number of different forms, including that of a syllogism, essay, or dialogue, among others. To the extent which argument overlaps with and is reliant upon language, it may be considered one of the central concerns of verbal reasoning, or for that matter any reasoning, at large. At this point a sort of maximal scope has been reached, wherein it is appropriate to point out and address the issue of circularity. Insofar as verbal reasoning is used to create and analyze arguments of language, while at the same time arguments, using language as their vehicle, are used to exercise and analyze reasoning, there will be some inevitable degree of circularity between the two. This point offers a fitting conclusion to the current section, and serves to reiterate the importance of verbal reasoning. Verbal intelligence is the ability to understand and reason using concepts framed in words. More broadly, it is linked to problem solving, abstract reasoning, 1, and working memory. Verbal intelligence is one of the most G-loaded abilities. 2. English alphabet. Letters form the basis for many languages, including English. Linguistic intelligence. In order to understand linguistic intelligence, it is important to understand the mechanisms that control speech and language. These mechanisms can be broken down into 4 major groups: speech generation, talking, speech comprehension, hearing, writing generation, writing, and writing comprehension, reading. In a practical sense, linguistic intelligence is the extent to which an individual can use language, both written and verbal, to achieve goals. 3. Linguistic intelligence is a part of Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory that deals with individuals' ability to understand both spoken and written language, as well as their ability to speak and write themselves. Spoken language. Generation. Inferior frontal gyrus, a major part of the inferior frontal cortex. Speech production is the process by which a thought in the brain is converted into an understandable auditory form. 4, 5, 6. This is a multi-stage mechanism that involves many different areas of the brain. The first stage is planning, where the brain constructs words and sentences that turn the thought into an understandable form. 4. This occurs primarily in the inferior frontal cortex, specifically in an area known as Broca's area. 5, 6, 7. Next, the brain must plan how to physically create the sounds necessary for speech by linking the planned speech with known sounds, or phonemes. While the location of these associations is not known, it is known that the supplementary motor area plays a key role in this step. 4, 8. Finally, the brain must signal for the words to actually be spoken. This is carried out by the premotor cortex and the motor cortex. 8. Motor cortex with muscle localization shown. In most cases, speech production is controlled by the left hemisphere. In a series of studies, Wilder Penfield, among others, probed the brains of both right-handed, generally left hemisphere dominant, and left-handed, generally right hemisphere dominant patients. They discovered that, regardless of handedness, the left hemisphere was almost always the speech-controlling side. However, it has been discovered that in cases of neural stress, hemorrhage, stroke, etc., the right hemisphere has the ability to take control of speech functions. 9. Comprehension. Verbal comprehension is a fairly complex process, and it is not fully understood. From various studies and experiments, it has been found that the superior temporal sulcus activates when hearing human speech, and that speech processing seems to occur within Wernicke's area. 6, 8. Auditory feedback and feedforward. Hearing plays an important part in both speech generation and comprehension. When speaking, the person can hear their speech, and the brain uses what it hears as a feedback mechanism to fix speech errors. 10. If a single feedback correction occurs multiple times, the brain will begin to incorporate the correction to all future speech, making it a feed-forward mechanism. 10. This is apparent in some deaf people. Deafness, as well as other, smaller deficiencies in hearing, can greatly affect one's ability to comprehend spoken language, as well as to speak it. 11. However, if the person loses hearing ability later in life, most can still maintain a normal level of verbal intelligence. This is thought to be because of the brain's feed-forward mechanism still helping to fix speech errors, even in the absence of auditory feedback. 10. Written language. Generation. Generation of written language is thought to be closely related to speech generation. Neurophysiologically speaking, it is believed that Broca's area is crucial for early linguistic processing, while the inferior frontal gyrus is critical in semantic processing. 6, 8. According to Penfield, writing differs in two major ways from verbal language. First, instead of relating the thought to sounds, the brain must relate the thought to symbols or letters, and second, the motor cortex activates a different set of muscles to write than when speaking. 8. Comprehension. Written comprehension, similar to spoken comprehension, seems to occur primarily in Wernicke's area. 8. However, instead of using the auditory system to gain language input, written comprehension relies on the visual system. Genetic links. Protein NRXN1, which is created from the NRXN1 gene. While the capabilities of the physical structures used are large factors in determining linguistic intelligence, there have been several genes that have been linked to individual linguistic ability. 12. The NRXN1 gene has been linked to general language ability, and mutations of this gene has been shown to cause major issues to overall linguistic intelligence. 12. The CNTNAP2 gene is believed to affect language development and performance, and mutations in this gene is thought to be involved in autism spectrum disorders. 12. PCDH11 has been linked to language capacity, and it is believed to be one of the factors that accounts for the variation in linguistic intelligence. 12. Measurement and testing. The Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale 3 weighs 3 divides verbal IQ, VIQ, into two categories. Verbal Comprehension Index, VCI, vocabulary, similarities, information, and comprehension. Working Memory Index, WMI, arithmetic, digit span, and letter number sequencing. 13, 14, verbal fluency tests. In general, it is difficult to test for linguistic intelligence as a whole, therefore various types of verbal fluency tests are often used. 5, 7, 15. Semantic fluency test. Subjects are asked to produce words in groups, such as animals, kitchen tools, fruits, etc. This type of test focuses on the subject's ability to generate words that have meaning to them. This test has been found to be sensitive to age. 15. Formal fluency test. Subjects are asked to produce words given specific letter-based rules. This test has been found to be sensitive to education level. 15. Initial letter fluency test. A type of formal fluency test where the subject is asked to list words starting with a specific letter. 15. Excluded letter fluency test. A type of formal fluency test where the subject is asked to list words that do not contain a certain letter. 15. Verb fluency test. Subjects are asked to list verbs. Subjects are then tested on their ability to use listed verbs. 15. Verbal reproduction test. Subjects are asked to listen to a monologue. They are then asked to repeat the monologue, and the subject is scored based on the number of words and lemmas used from the original monologue. 3. Verbal fluency in children. In one series of tests, it was shown that when children were given verbal fluency tests, a larger portion of their cortex activated compared to adults, as well as activation of both the left and right hemispheres. This is most likely due to the high plasticity of newly developing brains. 16. Possible conflict. Recently, a study was done showing that verbal fluency test results can differ depending on the mental focus of the subject. In this study, mental focus on physical speech production mechanisms caused speech production times to suffer, whereas mental focus on auditory feedback improved these times. 17. Disorders affecting linguistic intelligence. Since linguistic intelligence is based on several complex skills, there are many disorders and injuries that can affect an individual's linguistic intelligence. Injuries. Damage and injury in the brain can severely lower one's ability to communicate, and therefore lower one's linguistic intelligence. Common forms of major damage are strokes, concussions, brain tumors, viral bacterial damage, and drug-related damage. The three major linguistic disorders that result from these injuries are aphasia, alexia, and agraphia. 8. Aphasia is the inability to speak, and can be caused by damage to Broca's area or the motor cortex. 8. Alexia is the inability to read, which can arise from damage to Wernicke's area, among other places. 8. Agraphia is the inability to write, which can also arise from damage to Broca's area or the motor cortex. 8. In addition, damage to large areas of the brain can result in any combinations of these disorders, as well as a loss of other abilities. 8. Pure language disorders. There are several disorders that primarily affect only language skills. 3 major pure language disorders are developmental verbal dyspraxia, specific language impairment, and stuttering. 12. Developmental verbal dyspraxia (DVD) is a disorder where children have errors in consonant and vowel production. 12. Specific language impairment (SLE) is a disorder where the patient has a lack of language acquisition skills, despite a seemingly normal intelligence level in other areas. 12. Stuttering is a fairly common disorder where speech flow is interrupted by involuntary repetitions of syllables. 12. Other disorders affecting language. Some disorders cause a wide array of effects, and language impairment is merely one of many possible symptoms. The 2 major disorders of this type are autism spectrum disorder and epilepsy. 12. Autism spectrum disorder (ASD) is a disorder in which the patient suffers from decreased social skills and lowered mental flexibility. As a result, many patients suffering from ASD also have language problems, arising from both the lack of social interaction and lowered mental flexibility. 12. Epilepsy is a disorder where electrical malfunctions or miscommunications in the brain cause seizures, leading to muscle spasms and activation of other organs and systems of the body. Over time, epilepsy can lead to cognitive and behavioral decay. This mental decay can eventually lead to a loss of language and communication skills. 12. Some authors discuss the relationships that exist between expressive language and auditory reception, and therefore language disorders and auditory processing disorders. Grammar. English grammar is the set of structural rules of the English language. This includes the structure of words, phrases, clauses, sentences, and whole texts. Overview. This article describes a generalized, present-day standard English, forms of speech and writing used in public discourse, including broadcasting, education, entertainment, government, and news, over a range of registers, from formal to informal. Divergences from the grammar described here occur in some historical, social, cultural, and regional varieties of English, although these are minor compared to the differences in pronunciation and vocabulary. Modern English has largely abandoned the inflectional case system of Indo-European in favor of analytic constructions. The personal pronouns retain morphological case more strongly than any other word class, a remnant of the more extensive Germanic case system of Old English. For other pronouns, and all nouns, adjectives, and articles, grammatical function is indicated only by word order, by prepositions, and by the Saxon genitive or English possessive, s. 1. Word classes and phrases. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs are open classes, word classes that readily accept new members, such as the noun celebutant, a celebrity who frequents the fashion circles, and other similar relatively new words. 2. The rest are closed classes. For example, it is rare for a new pronoun to enter the language. Word classes and phrases. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs are open classes, word classes that readily accept new members, such as the noun celebutant, a celebrity who frequents the fashion circles, and other similar relatively new words. 2. The rest are closed classes. For example, it is rare for a new pronoun to enter the language. Determiners, traditionally classified along with adjectives, have not always been regarded as a separate part of speech. Interjections are another word class, but these are not described here as they do not form part of the clause and sentence structure of the language. 2. Linguists generally accept 9 English word classes: nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, determiners, and exclamations. English words are not generally marked for word class. It is not usually possible to tell from the form of a word which class it belongs to. Inflectional endings and derivational suffixes are unique and specific to. On the other hand, most words belong to more than one word class. For example, run can serve as either a verb or a noun. These are regarded as 2 different lexemes. 3 lexemes may be inflected to express different grammatical categories. The lexeme run has the forms runs, ran, runny, runner, and running. 3 words in one class can sometimes be derived from those in another. This has the potential to give rise to new words. For example, the noun aerobics has given rise to the adjective aerobicized. 3 words combine to form phrases. A phrase typically serves the same function as a word from some particular word class. 3 For example, my very good friend Peter is a phrase that can be used in a sentence as if it were a noun, and is therefore called a noun phrase. Similarly, adjectival phrases and adverbial phrases function as if they were adjectives or adverbs, but with other types of phrases, the terminology has different implications. For example, a verb phrase consists of a verb together with any objects and other dependents. A prepositional phrase consists of a preposition and its complement, and is therefore usually a type of adverbial phrase, and a determiner phrase is a type of noun phrase containing a determiner. Nouns. Many common suffixes form nouns from other nouns or from other types of words, such as age, shrinkage, hood, sisterhood, and so on. 3 Though many nouns are base forms containing no such suffix: cat, grass, France. Nouns are also created by converting verbs and adjectives, as with the words talk and reading, a boring talk, the assigned reading. Nouns are sometimes classified semantically by their meanings as proper and common nouns: Cyrus, China versus frog, milk, or as concrete and abstract nouns: book, laptop versus embarrassment, prejudice. 4 A grammatical distinction is often made between countable nouns such as clock and city, and uncountable nouns such as milk and decor. 5 Some nouns can function both as countable and as uncountable, such as wine, in this is a good wine. Countable nouns generally have singular and plural forms. 4 In most cases the plural is formed from a singular by adding es, as in dogs, bushes, although there are also irregular forms: woman, women, foot, feet, including cases where the 2 forms are identical: sheep, series. For more details see English plural. Certain nouns can be used with plural verbs even though they are singular in form, as in the government where the government is considered to refer to the people constituting the government. This is a form of synesis, and is more common in British and American English. See English plural section: singulars with collective meaning treated as plural. English nouns are not marked for cases they are in some languages, but they have possessive forms, through the addition of s as in John's, children's, or just an apostrophe with no change in pronunciation in the case of es plurals, the dog's owners, and sometimes other words ending with s, Jesus love. More generally the ending can be applied to noun phrases, as in the man you saw yesterday's sister, see below. The possessive form can be used either as a determiner, Mannion is cat, or as a noun phrase, Mannion is the one next to James. The status of the possessive as an affix or acclitic is the subject of debate. 6. 7. It differs from the noun inflection of languages such as German, in that the genitive ending may attach to the last word of the phrase. To account for this, the possessive can be analyzed, for instance as a clitic construction and clitic postposition, 8 or as an inflection 9, 10 of the last word of a phrase edge inflection. Phrases. Noun phrases are phrases that function grammatically as nouns within sentences, for example as the subject or object of a verb. Most noun phrases have a noun as their head. 5. An English noun phrase typically takes the following form, not all elements need be present. Determiner plus pre-modifiers plus noun plus post-modifiers complement in this structure. The determiner may be an article that, an, or other equivalent word, as described in the following section. In many contexts, it is required for a noun phrase to include some determiner. Pre-modifiers include adjectives and some adjective phrases, such as red, really lovely, and noun adjuncts, such as college and the phrase the college student. Adjectival modifiers usually come before noun adjuncts. A complement or post-modifier 5 may be a prepositional phrase. Of London, a relative clause like, which we saw yesterday, certain adjective or participial phrases. Sitting on the beach or a dependent clause or infinitive phrase appropriate to the noun like. That the world is round after a noun such as fact or statement, or to travel widely after a noun such as desire. An example of a noun phrase that includes all of the above-mentioned elements is that rather attractive young college student to whom you were talking. Here that is the determiner, rather attractive and young are adjectival pre-modifiers, college is a noun adjunct, student is a noun serving as the head of the phrase, and to whom you were talking is a post-modifier, a relative clause in this case. Rather attractive and young are adjectival pre-modifiers, college is a noun adjunct, student is a noun serving as the head of the phrase, and to whom you were talking is a post-modifier, a relative clause in this case. Notice the order of the pre-modifiers, the determiner that must come first and the noun adjunct college must come after the adjectival modifiers. Coordinators such as and, or, and but can be used at various levels in noun phrases, as in John, Paul, and Mary, the matching green coat and hat, a dangerous but exciting ride, a person sitting down or standing up. See section conjunctions below for more explanation. Noun phrases can also be placed in apposition where two consecutive phrases refer to the same thing, as in that president, Abraham Lincoln. Where that president and Abraham Lincoln are in apposition. In some contexts, the same can be expressed by a prepositional phrase, as in the twin curses of famine and pestilence meaning, the twin curses, that are, famine and pestilence. Particular forms of noun phrases include phrases formed by the determiner with an adjective, as in the homeless, the English these are plural phrases referring to homeless people or English people in general. Phrases with a pronoun rather than a noun as a head, see below, phrases consisting just of a possessive. Infinitive and gerund phrases, in certain positions. Certain clauses, such as it clauses and relative clauses like what he said, in certain positions. Gender. A system of grammatical gender, whereby every noun was treated as either masculine, feminine, or neuter, existed in Old English, but fell out of use during the Middle English period. Modern English retains features relating to natural gender, most prominently the use of pronouns such as he and she to refer specifically to persons or animals of one or other genders and certain others such as it for sexless objects, although feminine pronouns are sometimes used when referring to ships and more uncommonly some airplanes and analogous machinery in nation-states. Some aspects of gender usage in English have been influenced by the movement towards a preference for gender-neutral language. Animals are triple gender nouns, being able to take masculine, feminine and neuter pronouns. 11. While the vast majority of nouns in English do not carry gender, there remain some gendered nouns e.g. you, sow, rooster and derivational affixes e.g. widower, waitress that denote gender. 12. Masculine, feminine, gender neutral. Man, woman, adult, boy, girl, child, husband, wife, spouse, actor, actress, performer, rooster, hen, chicken. Many nouns that mention people's roles and jobs can refer to either a masculine or a feminine subject, for instance, cousin, teenager, teacher, doctor, student, friend, and colleague. 13. Jane is my friend. She is a dentist. Paul is my cousin. He is a dentist. Often a gender distinction for these neutral nouns is established by inserting the word male or female. 13. Sam is a male nurse. No, he is not my boyfriend, he is just a male friend. I have 3 female cousins and 2 male cousins. Rarely, nouns illustrating things with no gender are referred to with a gendered pronoun to convey familiarity. It is also standard to use the gender-neutral pronoun it. 13. I love my car. She, the car, is my greatest passion. France is popular with her France's neighbors at the moment. I traveled from England to New York on the Queen Elizabeth. She, the Queen Elizabeth, is a great ship. Determiners. English determiners constitute a relatively small class of words. They include the articles the and certain demonstrative and interrogative words such as this, that, and which, possessive such as my and whose. The role of determiner can also be played by noun possessive forms such as John's and the girls, various quantifying words like all, some, many, various, and numerals 1, 2, etc. There are also many phrases, such as a couple of, that can play the role of determiners. Determiners are used in the formation of noun phrases, see above. Many words that serve as determiners can also be used as pronouns this, that, many, etc. Determiners can be used in certain combinations, such as all the water and the many problems. In many contexts, it is required for a noun phrase to be completed with an article or some other determiner. It is not grammatical to say just cat sat on table, one must say my cat sat on the table. The most common situations in which a complete noun phrase can be formed without a determiner are when it refers generally to a whole class or concept, as in dogs are dangerous and beauty is subjective, and when it is a name, Jane, Spain, etc. This is discussed in more detail at English articles and zero article in English. Pronouns. Pronouns are a relatively small, closed class of words that function in the place of nouns or noun phrases. They include personal pronouns, demonstrative pronouns, relative pronouns, interrogative pronouns, and some others, mainly indefinite pronouns. The full set of English pronouns is presented in the following table. Non-standard, informal and archaic forms are in italics. Nominative, accusative, reflexive. Independent genitive. Dependent. Genitive, subject, object, possessive. First person singular I me myself mine my mind before. Foul. Me, especially. Brie. Plural we us ourselves ourself. Ours are. Second person singular standard you yourself yours your archaic. Informal. Thou thee thyself thine before. Foul. Plural standard you yourselves yours your archaic you yourselves yours your. Non-standard ye. You all y'all. Youse. Etc. See above ye. You all y'all. Nouns that. Nominative, accusative, reflexive. Independent, genitive. Dependent. Genitive, subject, object, possessive. First person singular, I, me, myself, mine, my mind, before. Foul. We, especially. Brie. Plural, we, us, ourselves, ourself. Ours are. Second person singular, standard, you, yourself, yours, your, archaic. Informal. Thou, thee, thyself, thine, thy, thine, before. Foul. Plural, standard, you, yourselves, yours, your, archaic, ye, you, yourselves, yours, your. Non-standard, ye. You all y'all. Youse. Etc. See above, ye. You all y'all. Youse, yourselves, y'alls, or y'alls. Selves, years. Y'alls or y'alls, ear. Y'alls or y'alls. Third person singular masculine, he, him, himself, his. Feminine, she, her, herself, hers, her. Neuter, it, itself, its. Apicene, they, them, themselves, themself. Theirs, their. Plural, they, them, themselves, theirs, their. Generic formal, one, oneself, one's, informal, you, yourself, your. WH relative n. Interrogative. For persons who, whom. Who. Whose. Non-personal, what relative only which. Reciprocal. Each other, one. Another. Dumb, either it. Interrogative only. Personal. The personal pronouns of modern standard English are presented in the table above. They are I, you, she, he, it, we, and they. The personal pronouns are so called not because they apply to persons which other The personal pronouns are so called not because they apply to persons which other pronouns also do, but because they participate in the system of grammatical person first, second, third. The second person forms such as you are used with both singular and plural reference. In the southern United States, y'all, you all is used as a plural form, and various other phrases such as you guys are used in other places. An archaic set of second-person pronouns used for singular reference is thou, thee, thyself, thy, thine, which are still used in religious services and can be seen in older works, such as Shakespeare's. In such texts, the use set of pronouns are used for plural reference, or with singular reference as a formal V form. You can also be used as an indefinite pronoun, referring to a person in general. See generic you compared to the more formal alternative, one, reflexive oneself, possessive ones. The third-person singular forms are differentiated according to the gender of the referent. For example, she is used to refer to a woman, sometimes a female animal, and sometimes an object to which feminine characteristics are attributed, such as a ship or a country. A man, and sometimes a male animal, is referred to using he. In other cases, it can be used. See gender in English. The word it can also be used as a dummy subject, concerning abstract ideas like time, weather, etc., or a dummy object of a verb or preposition. The third-person form they is used with both plural and singular reference. Historically, singular they was restricted to quantificational constructions such as each employee should clean their desk in referential cases where the reference gender was unknown. However, it is increasingly used when the reference gender is irrelevant or when the referent is neither male nor female. The possessive determiners such as my are used as determiners together with nouns, as in my old man, some of his friends. The second possessive forms like mine are used when they do not qualify a noun, as pronouns, as in mine is bigger than yours, and as predicates, as in this one is mine. Note also the construction of friend of mine, meaning, someone who is my friend. See English possessive for more details. Demonstrative. The demonstrative pronouns of English are this, plural these, and that, plural those, as in these are good, I like that. All four words can also be used as determiners followed by a noun, as in those cars. They can also form the alternative pronominal expressions this, that one, these, those ones. Interrogative. The interrogative pronouns are who, what, and which all of them can take the suffix ever for emphasis. The pronoun who refers to a person or people, it has an oblique form whom, though in informal contexts this is usually replaced by who, and a possessive form pronoun or determiner whose. The pronoun what refers to things or abstracts. The word which is used to ask about alternatives from what is seen as a closed set, which of the books do you like best? It can also be an interrogative determiner, which book. This can form the alternative pronominal expressions which one and which ones. Which, who, and what can be either singular or plural, although who and what often take a singular verb regardless of any supposed number. For more information see who. In Old and Middle English, the roles of the three words were different from their roles today. The interrogative pronoun wahoo, what, had only singular forms and also only distinguished between non-neuter and neuter, the neuter nominative form being wait. 14th note that neuter and non-neuter refers to the grammatical gender system of the time, rather than the so-called natural gender system of today. A small holdover of this is the ability of relative but not interrogative whose to refer to non-persons, e.g., the car whose door won't open. All the interrogative pronouns can also be used as relative pronouns, though what is quite limited in its use. 1. See below for more details. Relative. The main relative pronouns in English are who, with its derived forms whom and whose, which, and that. 15. The relative pronoun which refers to things rather than persons, as in the shirt, which used to be red, is faded. For persons, who is used, the man who saw me was tall. The oblique case form of who is whom, as in the man whom I saw was tall, although in informal registers who is commonly used in place of whom. The possessive form of who is whose, for example, the man whose car is missing. However, the use of whose is not restricted to persons. One can say an idea whose time has come. The word that is a relative pronoun is normally found only in restrictive relative clauses, unlike which and who, which can be used in both restrictive and unrestrictive clauses. It can refer to either persons or things, and cannot follow a preposition. For example, one can say the song that or which I listened to yesterday, but the song to which not to that I listened yesterday. The relative pronoun that is usually pronounced with a reduced vowel, schwa, and hence differently from the demonstrative that see weak and strong forms in English. If that is not the subject of the relative clause, it can be omitted, the song I listened to yesterday. If that is not the subject of the relative clause, it can be omitted, the song I listened to yesterday. The word what can be used to form a free relative clause, one that has no antecedent and that serves as a complete noun phrase in itself, as in I like what he likes. The words whatever and whichever can be used similarly, in the role of either pronouns whatever he likes or determiners whatever book he likes. When referring to persons, whoever and whomever can be used in a similar way. There. The word there is used as a pronoun in some sentences, playing the role of a dummy subject, normally of an intransitive verb. The logical subject of the verb then appears as a complement after the verb. This use of there occurs most commonly with forms of the verb be in existential clauses, to refer to the presence or existence of something. For example, there is a heaven, there are 2 cups on the table, there have been a lot of problems lately. It can also be used with other verbs. There exist 2 major variants, there occurred a very strange incident. The dummy subject takes the number, singular or plural, of a logical subject complement, hence it takes a plural verb if the complement is plural. In informal English, however, the contraction theirs is often used for both singular and plural. 16. The dummy subject can undergo inversion. Is there a test today? And never has there been a man such as this. It can also appear without a corresponding logical subject, in short sentences and question tags. There wasn't a discussion, was there? There was. The word there in such sentences has sometimes been analyzed as an adverb, or as a dummy predicate, rather than as a pronoun. 17. However, its identification as a pronoun is most consistent with its behavior in inverted sentences and question tags as described above. Because the word there can also be a deictic adverb, meaning, at to that place, a sentence like there's a river could have either of 2 meanings. A river exists, with there's a pronoun, and a river is in that place, with there's an adverb. In speech, the adverbial there would be given stress, while the pronoun would not. In fact, the pronoun is often pronounced as a weak form. Are. Reciprocal. The English reciprocal pronouns are each other and one another. Although they are written with a space, they are best thought of as single words. No consistent distinction in meaning or use can be found between them. Like the reflexive pronouns, their use is limited to contexts where an antecedent precedes it. In the case of the reciprocals, they need to appear in the same clause as the antecedent. 1. Other. Other pronouns in English are often identical in form to determiners, especially quantifiers, such as many, a little, etc. Sometimes, the pronoun form is different, as with none corresponding to the determiner no, nothing, everyone, somebody, etc. Many examples are listed as indefinite pronouns. Another indefinite or impersonal pronoun is one with its reflexive form oneself and possessive ones, which is a more formal alternative to generic you. 18. Verbs. The basic form of an English verb is not generally marked by any ending, although there are certain suffixes that are frequently used to form verbs, such as formulate, fy, electrify, and eyes, realize. 19. Many verbs also contain prefixes, such as unmask, outlast, overtake, and undervalue. 19. Verbs can also be formed from nouns and adjectives by zero derivation, as with the verbs snare, nose, dry, and calm. Most verbs have 3 or 4 inflected forms in addition to the base form. A third-person singular present tense form and es writes, watches, a present participle in gerund form meaning writing, a past tense wrote, and, though often identical to the past tense form, a past participle written. Regular verbs have identical past tense and past participle forms in ed, but there are 100 or so irregular English verbs with different forms. See list. The verbs have, do and say also have irregular third-person present tense forms, has, does, says. The verb be has the largest number of irregular forms am, is, are in the present tense, was, were in the past tense, been for the past participle. Most of what are often referred to as verb tenses, or sometimes aspects, in English are formed using auxiliary verbs. Apart from what are called the simple present writes, and simple past wrote, there are also continuous progressive forms, am, is, are, was, were writing, perfect forms, have, has, had written, and the perfect continuous have, has, had been writing, future forms, will write, will be writing, will have written, will have been writing, and conditionals also called future in the past, so forms equivalent to future ones but with would instead of will. The auxiliaries shall and should sometimes replace will and would in the first person. For the uses of these various verb forms, see English verbs and English clause syntax. The basic form of the verb be, write, play, is used as the infinitive, although there is also a to infinitive, to be, to write, to play used in many syntactical constructions. There are also infinitives corresponding to other aspects, to have written, to be writing, to have been writing. The second person imperative is identical to the basic infinitive. Other imperative forms may be made with let us go, or let's go, let them eat cake. A form identical to the infinitive can be used as a present subjunctive in certain contexts. It is important that he follow the more. That he be committed to the cause. There is also a past subjunctive distinct from the simple past only in the possible use of were instead of was used in some conditional sentences and similar. If I were or was rich, were he to arrive now. I wish she were or was here. For details see English subjunctive. The passive voice is formed using the verb be in the appropriate tense or form with the past participle of the verb in question. Cars are driven, he was killed, I am being tickled, it is nice to be pampered, etc. The performer of the action may be introduced in a prepositional phrase with by, as in they were killed by the invaders. The English modal verbs consist of the core modals can, could, may, might, must, shall, should, will, would, as well as ought to, had better, and in some uses dare and need. 20. These do not inflect for person or number. 20. Do not occur alone, and do not have infinitive or participle forms except synonyms, as with be, being, been able to for the modals can, could. The modals are used with the basic infinitive form of a verb, I can swim, he may be killed, we dare not move, need they go, except for ought, which takes to you ought to go. Modals can indicate the condition, probability, possibility, necessity, obligation and ability exposed by the speaker's or writer's attitude or expression. 21. The copula be, along with the modal verbs and the other auxiliaries, form a distinct class, sometimes called special verbs, or simply auxiliaries. 22. These have different syntax from ordinary lexical verbs, especially in that they make their interrogative forms by plain inversion with the subject, and their negative forms by adding not after the verb could I could not. Apart from those already mentioned, this class may also include used to, although the forms did he used to and he didn't used to are also found, and sometimes have even when not an auxiliary, forms like have you a sister and he hadn't a clue are possible, though becoming less common. It also includes the auxiliary do does, did. This is used with the basic infinitive of other verbs, those not belonging to the special verbs class, to make their question and negation forms, as well as emphatic forms. Do I like you? He doesn't speak English. We did close the fridge. For more details of this, see do support. Some forms of the copula and auxiliaries often appear as contractions, as in I'm for I am, you for you would or you had, and John's for John is. Their negated forms with following that are also often contracted. See section negation below. For details see English auxiliaries and contractions. Phrases. A verb together with its dependents, excluding its subject, may be identified as a verb phrase, although this concept is not acknowledged in all theories of grammar. 23. A verb phrase headed by a finite verb may also be called a predicate. The dependents may be objects, complements, and modifiers, adverbs or adverbial phrases. In English, objects and complements nearly always come after the verb. A direct object precedes other complements such as prepositional phrases, but if there is an indirect object as well, expressed without a preposition, then that precedes the direct object. Give me the book, but give the book to me. Adverbial modifiers generally follow objects, although other positions are possible. See under section adverbs below. Certain verb modifier combinations, particularly when they have independent meaning, such as take on and get up, are known as phrasal verbs. For details of possible patterns, see English clause syntax. See the non-finite clauses section of that article for verb phrases headed by non-finite verb forms, such as infinitives and participles. Adjectives. English adjectives, as with other word classes, cannot in general be identified as such by their form. 24. Although many of them are formed from nouns or other words by the addition of a suffix, such as al, habitual, full, blissful, icy, atomic-ish, impish, youngish, house, hazardous, etc., or from other adjectives using a prefix, disloyal, or redeemable, unforeseen, overtired. Adjectives may be used attributively, as part of a noun phrase nearly always preceding the noun they modify. For exceptions see postpositive adjective, as in the big house, or predicatively, as in the house is big. Certain adjectives are restricted to one or other use. For example, drunken is attributive, a drunken sailor, while drunk is usually predicative, the sailor was drunk. Comparison. Many adjectives have comparative and superlative forms in and est. 25 such as faster and fastest, from the positive form fast. Spelling rules which maintain pronunciation apply to suffixing adjectives just as they do for similar treatment of regular past tense formation. These cover consonant doubling, as in bigger and biggest, from big, and the change of white I after consonants, as in happier and happiest, from happy. The adjectives good and bad have the irregular forms better, best and worse, worst, also far becomes farther, farthest or further, furthest. The adjective old, for which the regular older and oldest are usual, also has the irregular forms elder and eldest, these generally being restricted to use in comparing siblings and in certain independent uses. For the comparison of adverbs, see adverbs below. Many adjectives, however, particularly those that are longer and less common, do not have inflected comparative and superlative forms. Instead, they can be qualified with more and most, as in beautiful, more beautiful, most beautiful. This construction is also sometimes used even for adjectives for which inflected forms do exist. Certain adjectives are classed as ungradable. 25 These represent properties that cannot be compared on a scale, they simply apply or do not, as with pregnant, dead, unique. Consequently, comparative and superlative forms of such adjectives are not normally used, except in a figurative, humorous or imprecise context. Similarly, such adjectives are not normally qualified with modifiers of degree such as very and fairly, although with some of them it is idiomatic to use adverbs such as completely. Another type of adjective sometimes considered ungradable is those that represent an extreme degree of some property, such as delicious and terrified. Phrases. An adjective phrase is a group of words that plays the role of an adjective in a sentence. It usually has a single adjective as its head, to which modifiers and complements may be added. 26. Adjectives can be modified by a preceding adverb or adverb phrase, as in very warm, truly imposing, more than a little excited. Some can also be preceded by a noun or quantitative phrase, as in fat-free, 2 meter long. Complements following the adjective may include prepositional phrases, proud of him, angry at the screen, keen on breeding toads, infinitive phrases, anxious to solve the problem, easy to pick up. Content clauses, i.e. that clauses and certain others, certain that he was right, unsure where they are. After comparatives, phrases or clauses with than, better than you, smaller than I had imagined. An adjective phrase may include both modifiers before the adjective and a complement after it, as in very difficult to put away. Adjective phrases containing complements after the adjective cannot normally be used as attributive adjectives before a noun. Sometimes they are used attributively after the noun, as in a woman proud of being a midwife, where they may be converted into relative clauses. A woman who is proud of being a midwife, but it is wrong to say a proud of being a midwife woman. Exceptions include very brief and often established phrases such as easy to use. Certain complements can be moved after the noun, leaving the adjective before the noun, as in a better man than you, a hard nut to crack. Certain attributive adjective phrases are formed from other parts of speech, without any adjective as their head, as in a 2-bedroom house, a no jeans policy. Adverbs. Adverbs perform a wide range of functions. They typically modify verbs or verb phrases, adjectives or adjectival phrases or other adverbs or adverbial phrases. 27 However, adverbs also sometimes qualify noun phrases, only the boss, quite a lovely place, pronouns and determiners, almost all prepositional phrases, halfway through the movie, or whole sentences, to provide contextual comment or indicate an attitude. Frankly, I don't believe you. 28 They can also indicate a relationship between clauses or sentences, he died, and consequently I inherited the estate. 28 Many English adverbs are formed from adjectives by adding the ending ly, as in hopefully, widely, theoretically. For details of spelling and etymology, see ly. Certain words can be used as both adjectives and adverbs, such as fast, straight, and hard. These are flat adverbs. In earlier usage, more flat adverbs were accepted in formal usage. Many of these survive in idioms and colloquially. That's just plain ugly. Some adjectives can also be used as flat adverbs when they actually describe the subject. The streaker ran naked, not the streaker ran nakedly. The adverb corresponding to the adjective good as well. Note that bad forms the regular badly, although ill is occasionally used in some phrases. There are also many adverbs that are not derived from adjectives, 27, including adverbs of time, of frequency, of place, of degree, and with other meanings. Some suffixes that are commonly used to form adverbs from nouns are word s, as in homeward, s, and wise, as in lengthwise. Adverbs are also formed by adding ly to the participles. For example, according, a present participle adjective, becomes accordingly, an adverb, by adding ly after it. The past participle adjective repeated becomes repeatedly by adding ly after it. Most adverbs form comparatives and superlatives by modification with more and most, often, more often, most often, smoothly, more smoothly, most smoothly. See also comparison of adjectives, above. However, a few adverbs retain irregular inflection for comparative and superlative forms. 27 much, more, most, a little, less, least, well, better, best, badly, worse, worst, far, further, farther, furthest, farthest, or follow the regular adjectival inflection, fast, faster, fastest, soon, sooner, soonest, etc. Adverbs indicating the manner of an action are generally placed after the verb and its objects. We consider the proposal carefully, although other positions are often possible. We carefully consider the proposal. Many adverbs of frequency, degree, certainty, etc. such as often, always, almost, probably, and various others such as just, tend to be placed before the verb. They usually have chips, although if there is an auxiliary or other special verb, see section verbs above, then the normal position for such adverbs is after that special verb, or after the first of them. If there is more than one, I have just finished the crossword. She can usually manage a pint. We are never late. You might possibly have been unconscious. Adverbs that provide a connection with previous information, such as next, then, however, and those that provide the context, such as time or place, for a sentence, are typically placed at the start of the sentence. Yesterday we went on a shopping expedition. 29. If the verb has an object, the adverb comes after the object. He finished the test quickly. When there is more than one type of adverb, they usually appear in the order, manner, place, time. His arm was hurt severely at home yesterday. 30. A special type of adverb is the adverbial particle used to form phrasal verbs, such as up and pick up, on and get on, etc. If such a verb also has an object, then the particle may precede or follow the object, although it will normally follow the object if the object is a pronoun. Pick the pen up or pick up the pen, but pick it up. Phrases. An adverb phrase is a phrase that acts as an adverb within a sentence. 31. An adverb phrase may have an adverb as its head, together with any modifiers, other adverbs or adverb phrases, and complements, analogously to the adjective phrases described above. For example, very sleepily, all too suddenly, oddly enough, perhaps shockingly for us. Another very common type of adverb phrase is the prepositional phrase, which consists of a preposition and its object. In the pool, after 2 years, for the sake of harmony. Prepositions. Prepositions form a closed word class. 28. Although there are also certain phrases that serve as prepositions, such as in front of. A single preposition may have a variety of meanings, often including temporal, spatial, and abstract. Many words that are prepositions can also serve as adverbs. Examples of common English prepositions including phrasal instances are of, in, on, over, under, to, from, with, in front of, behind, opposite, by, before, after, during, through, in spite of or despite, between, among, etc. A preposition is usually used with a noun phrase as its complement. A preposition together with its complement is called a prepositional phrase. 32 examples are in England, under the table, after 6 pleasant weeks, between the land and the sea. A prepositional phrase can be used as a complement or post-modifier of a noun in a noun phrase, as in the man in the car, the start of the fight, as a complement of a verb or adjective, as in deal with the problem, proud of oneself, or generally as an adverb phrase, see above. English allows the use of stranded prepositions. This can occur in interrogative and relative clauses, where the interrogative or relative pronoun that is the preposition's complement is moved to the start fronted, leaving the preposition in place. This kind of structure is avoided in some kinds of formal English. For example, what are you talking about? Possible alternative version, about what are you talking? The song that you were listening to. More formal, the song to which you were listening. Notice that in the second example the relative pronoun that could be omitted. Stranded prepositions can also arise in passive voice constructions and other uses of passive past participial phrases, where the complement in a prepositional phrase can become zero in the same way that a verb's direct object would. It was looked at. I will be operated on. Get your teeth seen to. The same can happen in certain uses of infinitive phrases. He is nice to talk to. This is the page to make copies of. Conjunctions. Conjunctions express a variety of logical relations between items, phrases, clauses, and sentences. 33. They help link ideas, show relationships, and form more complex sentences. The principal coordinating conjunctions in English are and, or, but, nor, so, yet, and for. These can be used in many grammatical contexts to link two or more items of equal grammatical status. 33. For example, noun is combined into a longer noun phrase, such as John, Eric, and Jill, the red coat or the blue one. When an is used, the resulting noun phrase is plural. A determiner does not need to be repeated with the individual elements. The cat, the dog, and the mouse, and the cat, dog, and mouse are both correct. The same applies to other modifiers. The word but can be used here in the sense of, except, nobody but you. Adjective or adverb phrases combined into a longer adjective or adverb phrase. Tired but happy, over the fields and far away. Verbs or verb phrases combined as in he washed, peeled, and diced the turnips. Verbs conjoined. Object shared. He washed the turnips, peeled them, and diced them. Full verb phrases, including objects, conjoined. Other equivalent items linked, such as prefixes linked in pre- and post-test counseling. 34. Numerals as in 2 or 3 buildings, etc. Clauses or sentences linked, as in we came, but they wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't let us in, nor would they explain what we had done wrong. Another example of clauses or sentences linked is, I like reading books, and I also enjoy watching movies. There are also correlative conjunctions, where as well as the basic conjunction, an additional element appears before the first of the items being linked. 33. The common correlatives in English are either, or either a man or a woman. Neither, nor neither clever nor funny. Both, and they both punished and rewarded them. Not, but, particularly and not only. But also, not exhausted but exhilarated, not only football but also many other sports. An example of a correlative conjunction can be seen in, not only did I finish my homework, but I also. An example of a correlative conjunction can be seen in, not only did I finish my homework, but I also helped my sibling. Subordinators make relations between clauses, making the clause in which they appear into a subordinate clause. 35. Some common subordinators in English are conjunctions of time, including after, before, since, until, when, while, conjunctions of cause and effect, including because, since, now that, as, in order that, so, conjunctions of opposition or concession, such as although, though, even though, whereas, while, conjunctions of condition, such as if, unless, only if, whether or not, even if, in case that the conjunction that, which produces content clauses, as well as words that produce interrogative content clauses, whether, where, when, how, etc. Subordinating conjunction generally comes at the very start of its clause, although many of them can be preceded by qualifying adverbs, as in probably because, especially if. The conjunction that can be omitted after certain verbs, as in she told us that she was ready. For the use of that in relative clauses, see section relative pronouns above. An example of a subordinating conjunction being used is, I went to the store because I needed milk. Case. Although English has largely lost its case system, personal pronouns still have three morphological cases that are simplified forms of the nominative, objective and genitive cases. 36. The nominative case, subjective pronouns such as I, he, she, we, they, who, whoever, used for the subject of a finite verb and sometimes for the complement of a copula. The oblique case, object pronouns such as me, him, her, it, us, them, whom, whomever, used for the direct or indirect object of a verb, for the object of a preposition, for an absolute disjunct, and sometimes for the complement of a copula. The genitive case, possessive pronouns such as my, mine, his, hers, its, ours, theirs, whose, used for a grammatical possessor. This is not always considered to be a case. See English possessive section. Status of the possessive is a grammatical case. Most English personal pronouns have five forms: the nominative and oblique case forms, the possessive case, which has both a determiner form, such as my, our, and a distinct independent form, such as mine, ours, with two exceptions: the third-person singular masculine and the third-person singular neuter it, which use the same form for both determiner and independent, his car, it is his, and a distinct reflexive or intensive form, such as myself, ourselves. The interrogative personal pronoun would exhibit greatest diversity of forms within the modern English pronoun system, having definite nominative, oblique, and genitive forms who, whom, whose, and equivalently coordinating indefinite forms whoever, whomever, and whose were. Forms such as I, he, and we are used for the subject I kicked the ball, whereas forms such as me, him, and us are used for the object John kicked me. 37. Declension. Nouns have distinct singular and plural forms, that is, they decline to reflect their grammatical number. Consider the difference between book and books. In addition, a few English pronouns have distinct nominative, also called subjective, and oblique or objective forms, that is, they decline to reflect their relationship to a verb or preposition, or case. Consider the difference between he, subjective, and him, objective, as in, he saw it, and, it saw him. Similarly, consider who, which is subjective, and the objective whom. Further, these pronouns and a few others have distinct possessive forms, such as his and whose. By contrast, nouns have no distinct nominative and objective forms, the two being merged into a single plain case. For example, chair does not change form between, the chair is here, subject, and, I saw the chair, direct object. Possession is shown by the clitic, s attached to a possessive noun phrase, rather than by declension of the noun itself. 38. Negation. As noted above under section verbs, a finite indicative verb or its clause is negated by placing the word not after an auxiliary, modal or other, special, verb such as do, can or be. For example, the clause I go is negated with the appearance of the auxiliary do, as I do not go, see do support. When the affirmative always uses auxiliary verbs, I am going, no other auxiliary verbs are added to negate the clause I am not going. Until the period of early modern English, negation was effected without additional auxiliary verbs, I go not. Most combinations of auxiliary verbs etc. with not have contracted forms, don't, can't, isn't, etc. Also the uncontracted negated form of can is written as a single word cannot. On the inversion of subject and verb, such as in questions, see below, the subject may be placed after a contracted negated form, should he not pay? Or shouldn't he pay? Other elements, such as noun phrases, adjectives, adverbs, infinitive and participial phrases, etc., can be negated by placing the word not before them, not the right answer, not interesting, not to enter, not noticing the train, etc. When other negating words such as never, nobody, etc. appear in a sentence, the negating not is omitted, unlike its equivalents in many languages. I saw nothing or I didn't see anything, but not except in non-standard speech, I didn't see nothing, see double negative. Such negating words generally have corresponding negative polarity items, ever for never, anybody for nobody, etc., which can appear in a negative context but are not negative themselves and can thus be used after a negation without giving rise to double negatives. Clause and sentence structure. A typical sentence contains one independent clause and possibly one or more dependent clauses, although it is also possible to link together sentences of this form into longer sentences, using coordinating conjunctions, see above. A clause typically contains a subject, a noun phrase, and a predicate, a verb phrase in the terminology used above, that is, a verb together with its objects and complements. A dependent clause also normally contains a subordinating conjunction, or in the case of relative clauses, a relative pronoun, or phrase containing one. Word order. English word order has moved from the Germanic verb second, v2, word order to being almost exclusively subject-verb-object, SVO. The combination of SVO order and use of auxiliary verbs often creates clusters of two or more verbs at the center of the sentence, such as he had hoped to try to open it. In most sentences, English marks grammatical relations only through word order. The subject constituent precedes the verb and the object constituent follows it. The object-subject-verb OSV may on occasion be seen in English, usually in the future tense are used as a contrast with the conjunction, but, such as in the following examples, Rome I shall see, I hate oranges but apples I'll eat. 39. Questions. Like many other Western European languages, English historically allowed questions to be formed by inverting the positions of the verb and subject. Modern English permits this only in the case of a small class of verbs, special verbs, consisting of auxiliaries as well as forms of the copula. See subject auxiliary inversion. To form a question from a sentence which does not have such an auxiliary or copula present, the auxiliary verb did needs to be inserted, along with inversion of the word order, to form a question. See do support. For example, she can dance. Right pointing arrow can she dance. Inversion of subject she and auxiliary can, I am sitting here. Right pointing arrow am I sitting here. Inversion of subject I and copula am, the milk goes in the fridge. Right pointing arrow does the milk go in the fridge. No special verb present, do support required. The above concerns yes-no questions, but inversion also takes place in the same way after other questions, formed with interrogative words such as where, what, how, etc. An exception applies when the interrogative word is the subject or part of the subject, in which case there is no inversion. For example, I go, right pointing arrow where do I go? WH question formed using inversion, with do support required in this case. He goes, right pointing arrow who goes? No inversion, because the question word who is the subject. Inversion does not apply in indirect questions. I wonder where he is not. Where is he? Indirect yes-no questions can be expressed using if or whether as the interrogative word. Ask them whether if they saw him. Negative questions are formed similarly, however, if the verb undergoing inversion has a contraction with not, then it is possible to invert the subject with this contraction as a whole. For example, John is going. Affirmative. John is not going. John isn't going. Negative, with and without contraction, isn't John going? Is John not going? Negative question, with and without contraction respectively. See also English auxiliaries and contractions section contractions and inversion. Dependent clauses. The syntax of a dependent clause is generally the same as that of an independent clause, except that the dependent clause usually begins with a subordinating conjunction or relative pronoun or phrase containing such. In some situations, as already described, the conjunction or relative pronoun that can be omitted. Another type of dependent clause with no subordinating conjunction is the conditional clause formed by inversion. See below. Other uses of inversion. The clause structure with an inverted subject and verb, used to form questions as described above, is also used in certain types of declarative sentences. This occurs mainly when the sentence begins with adverbial or other phrases that are essentially negative or contain words such as only, hardly, etc. Never have I known someone so stupid, only in France can such food be tasted. In elliptical sentences, see below, inversion takes place after so, meaning, also, as well as after the negative neither, so do I, neither does she. Inversion can also be used to form conditional clauses, beginning with should, were, subjunctive, or had, in the following ways. Should I win the race, equivalent to if I win the race. Were he a soldier, equivalent to if he were a soldier. Were he to win the race, equivalent to if he were to win the race, i.e. if he won the race, had he won the race, equivalent to if he had won the race. Other similar forms sometimes appear but are less common. There is also a construction with subjunctive be, as in be he alive or dead, meaning, no matter whether he is alive or dead. Use of inversion to express a third-person imperative is now mostly confined to the expression long live X, meaning, let X live long. Imperatives. In an imperative sentence, one giving an order, there is usually no subject in the independent clause, go away until I call you. It is possible, however, to include you as the subject for emphasis, you stay away from me. Elliptical constructions. Many types of elliptical construction are possible in English, resulting in sentences that omit certain redundant elements. Various examples are given in the article on ellipsis. Some notable elliptical forms found in English include language portal. Short statements of the form I can, he isn't, we mustn't. Here the verb phrase, understood from the context, is reduced to a single auxiliary or other, special, verb, negated if appropriate. If there is no special verb in the original verb phrase, it is replaced by do, this did, he does, they didn't. Clauses that omit the verb, in particular those like me too, nor me neither. The latter forms are used after negative statements. Equivalents including the verb, I do too or so do I don't either or neither do I. Tagged questions, formed with a special verb and pronoun subject, isn't it? Were there, am I not? The first published English grammar was a pamphlet for grammar of 1586, written by William Bullicar with the stated goal of demonstrating that English was just as rule-based as Latin. Bullicar's grammar was faithfully modeled on William Lilly's Latin grammar, Rudimenta Grammaticis 1534, used in English schools at that time, having been prescribed for them in 1542 by Henry VIII. Bullicar wrote his grammar in English and used a reformed spelling system of his own invention, but much English grammar, for much of the century after Bullicar's effort, was written in Latin, especially by authors who were aiming to be scholarly. John Wallis's Grammatica Linguae Anglicanae, 1685, was the last English grammar written in Latin. Even as late as the early 19th century, Lindley Murray, the author of one of the most widely used grammars of the day, was having to cite grammatical authorities to bolster the claim that grammatical cases in English are different from those in ancient Greek or Latin. English parts of speech are based on Latin and Greek parts of speech. 40. Some English grammar rules were adopted from Latin. For example, John Dryden is thought to have created the rule no sentences can end in a preposition because Latin cannot end sentences in prepositions. The rule of no split infinitives was adopted from Latin because Latin has no split infinitives. 41, 42, 43. English usage controversies. English prefixes. Subject object verb 1. Payne, John, Huddleston, Rodney 2002. Nouns and noun phrases. In Huddleston, Rodney. History of English grammars. See also. Notes and references. Grammatical tense. In grammar, tense is a category that expresses time reference. 1-2 tenses are usually manifested by the use of specific forms of verbs, particularly in their conjugation patterns. The main tenses found in many languages include the past, present, and future. Some languages have only two distinct tenses, such as past and non-past, or future and non-future. There are also tenseless languages, like most of the Chinese languages, though they can possess a future and non-future system typical of Sino-Tibetan languages. 3. In recent work, Maria Bittner and Judith Tinhauser have described the different ways in which tenseless languages nonetheless mark time. 4. 5. On the other hand, some languages make finer tense distinctions, such as remote versus recent past, or near versus remote future. Tenses generally express time relative to the moment of speaking. In some contexts, however, their meaning may be relativized to a point in the past or future which is established in the discourse the moment being spoken about. This is called relative as opposed to absolute tense. Some languages have different verb forms or constructions which manifest relative tense, such as pluperfect past in the past, and future in the past. Expressions of tense are often closely connected with expressions of the category of aspect. Sometimes what are traditionally called tenses, in languages such as Latin, may in modern analysis be regarded as combinations of tense with aspect. Verbs are also often conjugated for mood, and since in many cases the three categories are not manifested separately, some languages may be described in terms of a combined tense aspect mood tam system. Etymology. The English noun tense comes from Old French tense, time, spelled temps in modern French through deliberate archaization, from Latin tempus, time. 6. It is not related to the adjective tense, which comes from Latin tensus, the perfect passive participle of tender, stretch. 7. Uses of the term. In modern linguistic theory, tense is understood as a category that expresses grammaticalizes time reference, namely one which, using grammatical means, places a state or action in time. 1. 2. Nonetheless, in many descriptions of languages, particularly in traditional European grammar, the term tense is applied to verb forms or constructions that express not merely position in time, but also additional properties of the state or action, particularly aspectual or modal properties. The category of aspect expresses how a state or action relates to time, whether it is seen as a complete event, an ongoing or repeated situation, etc. Many languages make a distinction between perfective aspect denoting complete events and imperfective aspect denoting ongoing or repeated situations. Some also have other aspects, such as a perfect aspect, denoting a state following a prior event. Some of the traditional tenses express time reference together with aspectual information. In Latin and French, for example, the imperfect denotes past time in combination with imperfective aspect, while other verb forms, the Latin perfect, and the French passé composé or passé simple, are used for past time reference with perfective aspect. The category of mood is used to express modality, which includes such properties as uncertainty, evidentiality, and obligation. Commonly encountered moods include the indicative, subjunctive, and conditional. Mood can be bound up with tense, aspect, or both, in particular verb forms. Hence, certain languages are sometimes analyzed as having a single tense aspect mood tam system, without separate manifestation of the three categories. The term tense, then, particularly in less formal contexts, is sometimes used to denote any combination of tense proper, aspect, and mood. As regards English, there are many verb forms and constructions which combine time reference with continuous and/or perfect aspect, and with indicative, subjunctive or conditional mood. Particularly in some English language teaching materials, some or all of these forms can be referred to simply as tenses, see below. Particular tense forms need not always carry their basic time referential meaning in every case. For instance, the historical present is a use of the present tense to refer to past events. The phenomenon of fake tense is common cross-linguistically as a means of marking counterfactuality in conditionals and wishes. 8. 9. Possible tenses. Not all languages have tense. Tenseless languages include Chinese and Gerbil. 1050-53 Some languages have all three basic tenses, the past, present, and future, while others have only two. Some have past and non-past tenses, the latter covering both present and future times, as in Arabic, Japanese, and, in some analyses, English 11-12, whereas others such as Greenlandic, Quechua, and Nivik have future and non-future. 14. Some languages have four or more tenses, making finer distinctions either in the past e.g. remote versus recent past, or in the future e.g. near versus remote future. The six-tense language Kalalagaya of Australia has the remote past, the recent past, the today past, the present, the today near future and the remote future. Some languages, like the Amazonian Cubao language, have a historical past tense, used for events perceived as historical. 14. Tenses that refer specifically to today are called hodiernal tenses. These can be either past or future. Apart from Kalalagaya, another language which features such tenses is Emwera, a Bantu language of Tanzania. It is also suggested that in 17th century French, the passé composé serve as a hodiernal past. 15. Tenses that contrast with hodiernals, by referring to the past before today or the future after today, are called pre-hodiernal and post-hodiernal respectively. Some languages also have a crastinal tense, a future tense referring specifically to tomorrow, found in some Bantu languages, or a hasternal tense, a past tense referring specifically to yesterday. 16. Although this name is also sometimes used to mean pre-hodiernal. 17. A tense for after tomorrow is thus called post-crastinal, and one for before yesterday is called pre-hasternal. Another tense found in some languages, including Luganda, is the persistive tense, used to indicate that a state or ongoing action is still the case or, in the negative, is no longer the case. Luganda also has tenses meaning, so far, and, not yet. Some languages have special tense forms that are used to express relative tense. Tenses that refer to the past relative to the time under consideration are called anterior. These include the pluperfect for the past relative to a past time and the future perfect for the past relative to a future time. Similarly, posterior tenses refer to the future relative to the time under consideration, as with the English, future in the past, he said that you would go. Relative tense forms are also sometimes analyzed as combinations of tense with aspect, the perfect aspect in the anterior case, or the prospective aspect in the posterior case. Some languages, such as Nez Perce or Cavanagna, also have periodic tense markers that encode that the action occurs in a recurrent temporal period of the day, in the morning, during the day, at night, until dawn, etc., or of the year, in winter. 18. Some languages have cyclic tense systems. This is a form of temporal marking where tense is given relative to a reference point or reference span. In Burara, for example, events that occurred earlier on the day of speaking are marked with the same verb forms as events that happened in the far past, while events that happened yesterday compared to the moment of speech are marked with the same forms as events in the present. This can be thought of as a system where events are marked as prior or contemporaneous to points of reference on a timeline. 19. Morphology of tense. Tense is normally indicated by the use of a particular verb form, either an inflected form of the main verb, or a multi-word construction, or both in combination. Inflection may involve the use of affixes, such as the ed ending that marks the past tense of English regular verbs, but can also entail stem modifications, such as ablaut, as found as in the strong verbs in English and other Germanic languages, or reduplication. Multi-word tense constructions often involve auxiliary verbs or clitics. Examples which combine both types of tense marking include the French passé composé, which has an auxiliary verb together with the inflected past participle form of the main verb, and the Irish past tense, where the proclitic do in various surface forms appears in conjunction with the affixed or ablaut modified past tense form of the main verb. As has already been mentioned, indications of tense are often bound up with indications of other verbal categories, such as aspect and mood. The conjugation patterns of verbs often also reflect agreement with categories pertaining to the subject, such as person, number and gender. It is consequently not always possible to identify elements that mark any specific category, such as tense, separately from the others. Languages that do not have grammatical tense, such as most Semitic languages, express time reference chiefly by lexical means, through adverbials, time phrases, and so on. The same is done in tense languages, to supplement or reinforce the time information conveyed by the choice of tense. Time information is also sometimes conveyed as a secondary feature by markers of other categories, as with the aspect markers lila and wo, which in most cases place an action in past time. However, much time information is conveyed implicitly by context. It is therefore not always necessary, when translating from a tense to a tenseless language, say, to express explicitly in the target language all of the information conveyed by the tenses in the source. Nominal tense. A few languages have been shown to mark tense information, as well as aspect and mood, on nouns. This may be called nominal tense, or more broadly nominal tam, which includes nominal marking of aspect and mood as well. 20. Tense marking. Syntax of tense. The syntactic properties of tense have figured prominently in formal analyses of how tense marking interacts with word order. Some languages, such as French, allow an adverb v to intervene between a tense-marked verb v and its direct object o. In other words, they permit verb-adverb-object ordering. In contrast, other languages, such as English, do not allow the adverb to intervene between the verb and its direct object, and require adverb-verb-object ordering. Tense in syntax is represented by the category label T, which is the head of a TP tense phrase. Tenseless language. In linguistics, a tenseless language is a language that does not have a grammatical category of tense. Tenseless languages can and do refer to time, but they do so using lexical items such as adverbs or verbs, or by using combinations of aspect, mood, and words that establish time reference. 21. Examples of tenseless languages are Burmese, Gerbil, 22 50-53 Most varieties of Chinese, Malay including Indonesian Thai, Maya linguistic nomenclature, Yucatec Maya, Vietnamese and in some analyses Greenlandic 23 Kalaalleq and Guarani. 24. In particular languages. The study of modern languages has been greatly influenced by the grammar of the classical languages, since early grammarians, often monks, had no other reference point to describe their language. Latin terminology is often used to describe modern languages, sometimes with a change of meaning, as with the application of perfect to forms in English that do not necessarily have perfective meaning, or the words imperfect and perfect to German past tense forms that mostly lack any relationship to the aspects implied by those terms. Latin. Latin is traditionally described as having 6 verb paradigms for tense, the Latin for tense being tempus, plural tempora. Present praesens. Future futurum. Imperfect praeteritum imperfectum. Perfect praesens perfectum. Future perfect futurum perfectum. Pluperfect plus quam perfectum, praeteritum perfectum. Imperfect tense verbs represent a past process combined with so-called imperfective aspect, that is, they often stand for an ongoing past action or state at a past point in time, see secondary present, or represent habitual actions, see Latin tenses with modality, e.g. he was eating, he used to eat. The perfect tense combines the meanings of a simple past, he ate, with that of an English perfect tense, he has eaten, which in ancient Greek are two different tenses, aorist and perfect. The pluperfect, the perfect and the future perfect may also realize relative tenses, standing for events that are past at the time of another event, see secondary past, for instance, mortuus erat, mortuus est, mortuus erat may stand for respectively he had died, he has died, and he will have died. Latin verbs are inflected for tense and aspect together with mood, indicative, subjunctive, infinitive, and imperative, and voice, active or passive. Most verbs can be built by selecting a verb stem and adapting them to endings. Endings may vary according to the speech role, the number and the gender of the subject or an object. Sometimes, verb groups function as a unit and supplement inflection for tense, see Latin paraphrases. For details on verb structure, see Latin tenses and Latin conjugation. Ancient Greek. The paradigms for tenses in ancient Greek are similar to the ones in Latin, but with a three-way aspect contrast in the past, the aorist, the perfect and the imperfect. Both aorist and imperfect verbs can represent a past event. Through contrast, the imperfect verb often implies a longer duration, e.g. they urged him, versus they persuaded him. The aorist participle represents the first event of a two-event sequence and the present participle represents an ongoing event at the time of another event. 25 Perfect verbs stood for past actions if the result is still present, e.g. I have found it, or for present states resulting from a past event, e.g. I remember. English. English has only two morphological tenses, the present or non-past, as in he goes, and the past or preterite, as in he went. 26 The non-past usually references the present, but sometimes references the future, as in the bus leaves tomorrow. In special uses such as the historical present it can talk about the past as well. These morphological tenses are marked either with the suffix walks tilde walked or with ablaut sings tilde sang. In some contexts, particularly in English language teaching, various tense aspect combinations are referred to loosely as tenses. 27 Similarly, the term future tense is sometimes loosely applied to cases where modals such as will are used to talk about future points in time. Other Indo-European languages. Proto-European verbs had present, perfect, stative, imperfect and aorist forms. These can be considered as representing two tenses present and past with different aspects. Most languages in the Indo-European family have developed systems either with two morphological tenses, present or non-past, and past, or with three, present, past and future. The tenses often form part of entangled tense aspect mood conjugation systems. Additional tenses, tense aspect combinations, etc., can be provided by compound constructions containing auxiliary verbs. The Germanic languages, which include English, have present, non-past, and past tenses formed morphologically, with